Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Mullen, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Expert Databases, Exploring Key Databases for Your Institution from the Researcher's Perspective, sponsored by Springer and featuring Mikail Shaikh, Senior eProduct Manager at Springer. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we get started, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. In the main area of the screen, you can follow along with the presentation materials. Along the left-hand side, you will also see a Q&A panel that you can use to submit questions or comments. We'll spend some time responding to your questions during the program, so please feel free to submit these throughout. And finally, please note that today's program will be recorded and all registrants will receive follow-up instructions on how to access the archived version. Our featured speaker today is Mikail Shaikh, and here to introduce him is Christy Showers, who serves as Library Marketing Specialist for North America at Springer. Christy?
Thanks, Laura. We're excited to be speaking with you today about expert databases and the benefits they can offer libraries and researchers. As Springer's in-house expert, Senior eProduct Manager and Material Scientist, Mikail Shaikh will take you on an exploration of key databases with the insight of a researcher. As a researcher, Mikail specialized in the physics and chemistry of thin-film semiconductors and nanomaterials and has worked at prestigious research facilities like the National Chemical Laboratory in India and the Organic Electronics Laboratory at the University of Florida. He has a graduate degree in materials science and engineering from the University of Florida and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from the University of Pune. At this point, we're ready to get started, so Mikail, take it away.
Thanks, Christy, and welcome everyone. I would like to start by thanking ACRL and Choice for giving me this opportunity to talk about the various databases that we have here at Springer. And during this presentation, what I would like to do is try to play the role of both a product manager for these databases as well as going back to my researcher days, and I will attempt to talk about these databases and talk about their various features, as well as give you a couple of examples that I came up with where I would feel these databases would be especially useful. So to me, I really believe that a database is a resource that is searchable, that is granular, and that is comprehensive. So these are the things that I personally look for in a database when I'm looking for information online. And I really feel that for a product to be classified as a database, it should be such that you can access each individual piece of information as granularly as possible. So with that background, I would like to introduce our first database, Springer Materials. So Springer Materials was originally born out of the fact that finding information online is quite difficult, especially when you are talking about numerical, graphical information that is buried within journal articles, when it's buried within books and other online resources. It's really difficult to find this information. So Springer Materials is a database that allows you to identify the materials and chemical systems and find their corresponding properties. To give you an example of how this would work, let us look at a very simple example. So if I was to ask any researcher today in the 21st century to look for the band gap of a material, this particular material is a very popular semiconducting material that is used in the development of light-emitting diodes, LEDs. Most researchers would go to Google, and that's not a bad way to start. And typing in aluminum gallium arsenide and energy gap on Google gives you about 35,000 results. And this method does contain the right result. And as you can see, I've highlighted the second article that will give you the information that you're looking for. However, I believe that the Google method of searching is inherently rather time inefficient. The biggest reason why I, as a researcher, would not want to start at Google is that the top hits are not always relevant to what I'm looking for. I did this search a few days ago, and I'm quite sure if I was to go back and do the search today, the search results would be very different. That's because Google indexes everything. While this is not particularly a bad thing, it really means that this information cannot be reliably found in the same location. These results also come from multiple sources, which implies multiple subscriptions for libraries. Information can come from publishers like Springer, Elsevier, Wiley, etc. It could come from chemical suppliers. It could come from online sources. So there's a multitude of uh, sources that might or might not be completely reliable. So not everything is critically reviewed on Google. Google just displays everything that's out there. But the biggest difference and the biggest shortcoming, in my opinion, of the Google method of searching is the fact that this process is highly decentralized. If I wanted to compare the band gap of aluminum gallium arsenide, like in this example, to aluminum gallium phosphide, I would have to do the entire search process again. So with this background in mind, we've come up with a product called Springer Materials. And this is what the homepage looks like. If you go to www.springermaterials.com, this is what you would see. And I can type in aluminum gallium arsenide, and just like Google, it does give you a couple of suggestions. We call it a autofill list or a speed typing list. And when you type in the word band gap, this time you only get 17 results. So you might say that as compared to Google's 35,900 results, this is a lot less. But as you will see in the highlighted example, the names of these documents is quite different. It is not the name of a journal article. It is not the name of a book chapter. It is actually the name of the property you're looking for. So identifying the right document to open is much easier on a platform like Springer Materials, and that makes your searching much quicker. Clicking on that document gives you all the information you're looking for and all the references. So to compare this process to the Google way of searching, the biggest point here is that every single piece of information that you find on Springer Materials has been critically reviewed. And the critical review process that I will talk about in a few slides is one of the two cornerstones of what makes Springer Materials so unique. But in addition to that, as you can see here, all the data points are aggregated and all the references are aggregated. And in many cases, all the references are hot linked to the original articles, which makes it really easy to cross-reference for further reading. There is a breadcrumb trail, just like the Hansel and Gretel story. You can go back in your search process and go off into another direction. And what we are trying to achieve is a time-efficient system for the researcher and hopefully a cost-efficient system for the librarians. So what is Springer Materials? Springer Materials is a complete Landau-Bernstein database. I'm quite sure that a lot of you are familiar with this product, but just to look at the various fields that you see here, this particular database spreads all the way from particles, atoms, and nuclei at the top of this list to thermodynamics and multi-phase systems in the middle that is relevant to engineering, all the way to astronomy and geophysics. So this is a very vast, comprehensive database. But this is not all that is contained within Springer Materials. In addition to the Landau-Bernstein database, there are a couple of other types of information. The first is this concept of linked databases. These databases do not reside on Springer Materials, but they're searchable via Springer Materials and they exist outside the Springer world. But there are a number of databases that are completely integrated within this platform, and these are some of the examples that we have. In addition, we also have a couple of integrated handbooks. So Springer Materials is a database of a number of smaller databases. So the Landau-Bernstein database, to give you a little bit of history, has been around since 1883. It was established by a pair of a physicist and a chemist quite predictably named Landau and Bernstein. It was originally published in both English and German, and in 1961 the decision was made to publish this exclusively in English. So from 1961 to 2014, we have over 400 volumes in Springer Materials. Last time I counted, it was about 434, and we publish about 15 volumes every year. This picture that you see here is one of the few complete collections that we have in our office in Germany. And as you can quite easily imagine, the hard copy of the Landau-Bernstein book series has some inherent limitations. The first one, from a librarian's perspective, is that updates require you to constantly purchase new volumes. We publish 15 volumes every year, and in addition, a lot of the older volumes receive updates. So the hard copy means that you always have to purchase more volumes, and which requires space to maintain and also a capital cost. But from a researcher's perspective, what is much more important is that this information in the book format is not searchable nor cross-indexed. The researcher really needs to know what is where. To throw back to my previous example, if I was to look for the same information that I looked for earlier, I'm looking for the band gap of a semiconductor, I would need to know which volume this book exists in, this information exists in. So I would first need to read the index volume, then find the individual volume out of the 434 volumes that contains this information, and then look through a 1200-page tome to find the data I'm looking for. So clearly having an electronic version makes sense. So I mentioned that Springer Materials undergoes a critical review process. So if you look online, various pieces of information can be found on various different sources. In this example, I'm taking 4 different papers from 4 different publishers, but the comparison could be made as journals versus books, other databases versus journals, chemical suppliers versus journals, etc. And sometimes what happens is there is a small discrepancy in this data. As a researcher, I expect discrepancies like this to exist mostly due to 2 reasons. The first reason is simply historical. As the technology, as the state of technology advances, we realize that the, the accuracy of the measurements change. For example, we knew the band gap of silicon in the 1980s was 1.1. Today we know it is 1.115. Does that 0.015 electron volts make a difference? Absolutely. When Intel is developing chips that are 17 nanometers in thickness, yes, those 0.015 nanometers 0.015 electron volts makes all the difference. So the other reason why there would be a slight discrepancy is if the same property is measured by 2 different methods. In theory, they should meet, they should be exactly the same, but in reality, they are slightly different. So how do you really know that, how do you really know how to pick the right result? So Springer Materials employs a rather unique method. What we do is we monitor the state of research in a certain field, any field. We will take semiconductivity in this example, or temperature measurement, and we look at who are the best publishers, who are the most highly acclaimed authors, people who are clearly the thought leaders in this field. We approach them, we ask them to create their own group of review experts. This group picks the one best result, and that's the only result that goes into the Landau-Bernstein database. That really means all the information that you will find within the Landau-Bernstein database has been reviewed twice. The first time is when the paper is published itself, when a peer review is conducted and the contemporaries of a certain research scientist evaluates literature, evaluates the research, and determines whether that particular research is valuable. And then we have this critical review process where an umbrella group of experts looks at all the information that's available at that point and picks the best result. Now note that I say that it's the best result and not the correct result, because who knows, in 2015 we might know the band gap of silicon is 1.115823 electron volts. And at that time, if we feel that that's a significant enough change, these experts will publish another update. So hopefully this critical review process is clear. Moving on to the actual content of Landau-Bernstein database, this pictograph gives you an idea of the distribution of content within the Landau-Bernstein database. I would like to point out that these documents do total to about 100,000 online documents. And we are still only talking about the Landau-Bernstein database. We haven't yet touched upon the other various subset databases that we have. So as you can see in this pictogram, on the top left, we have information about particles, atoms, and nuclei, which is relevant to people who are studying physics. The big blue area in the middle of molecules and radicals is very relevant to people who are in chemistry and material science. On the top right, you have electronic structure and magnetism, so that's electrical engineering and again material science. The bottom right in the purple is multi-phase systems, so that's alloys and ceramics, very relevant to metallurgists, ceramics, semiconductor engineers, etc. The big yellow in the center is thermodynamics, which is relevant to chemical engineers, and the advanced fields on the bottom left. So the Landau-Bernstein database does cover a very wide range of content. And obviously, when you scale the size of the particles from the really, really small to the very large, you are also going to scale the types of properties that are relevant. So on the smaller side, we have information like energy levels, and on the large side, we have information like the tensile strengths of steel. Now, I mentioned that the Landau-Bernstein database contains about 100,000 documents. It also does reference about 250,000 materials. But that's not the only database that we have. In addition to this, Springer Materials is linked to Spresi. Spresi is a database that talks about synthetic chemistry and reaction synthesis. And this is a database, like I mentioned, we are linked to, so it is not completely contained within Springer Materials, but it is possible to do cross-searching on both platforms for information on the complementary database. In addition to this, we have a number of databases that are completely contained within Springer Materials. The first one is the Linus Pauling files that contains about 250,000 documents about the inorganic physical properties of materials. So it contains phase diagrams, it contains diffraction information, crystallography, etc. Not to be left out, we also have another database on organic materials. This one is a subset of the Dortmund data bank of software and separation technology, and it basically is a computer-readable data set for binary and pure organic mixtures. We have an adsorption database that contains about 1,000 isotherms of various organic and inorganic materials. We have a database on polymer thermodynamics that addresses the 150 most industrially and academically relevant polymers, and we have a large database on the chemical safety of materials. So these are the various databases that are contained within Springer Materials. We also have a number of unique search tools. The first is called the periodic table search, which is, I believe, quite useful for people who are in the inorganic arena. Here what you can do is click on the various elements of the periodic table to create your search. So if you're looking for a steel, you can click on just iron, chromium, and copper and search for all grades of stainless steel. You don't have to know the exact composition. This helps you create a very broad search. We also have a chemical structure search, which is very relevant to organic scientists and organic researchers, in which you can actually just draw out your chemical structure. And of course, if you really want to drill down into your content, we do offer advanced search, where you can search for the exact property of an exact substance with an exact subset area. And of course, it supports Boolean operations, and you can add and neglect certain words. The type of information that you would find here would be comparative data for the same material. As you can see here, we're looking at boron nitride, and we have the various properties of the same material. You can find the references to all this content. You can get figures and graphs for the various information. And you can get comparative properties. So let's look at something in the real world. It's great that all this information is there theoretically, but how can this be applied? So let's look at how would you use Springer Materials in the development of an oxygen sensor for an automobile. Now, to keep a very top level, zirconia is a material made of zirconium and oxygen that is used to monitor the level of oxygen in your exhaust of your automobile. If there is too much oxygen, that means your fuel is burning inefficiently. If there is too little oxygen, that means there's a very high chance that your engine might explode. The problem with using zirconia is that zirconia changes from one phase to another phase at a higher temperature. And the way to avoid this from happening is to add yttrium to this mixture. So our task is to stabilize zirconia, yttrium, and oxygen. And really to be able to do this, you need a phase diagram. So you can go to Springer Materials and you can say I'm looking for a yttrium oxide and a zirconia oxide phase diagram, and this is the kind of phase diagram that you would get. And that's great. But what are we offering beyond a phase diagram? A phase diagram can easily be found from a book or a journal. This is where the other facet of Springer Materials comes in. Like I mentioned earlier, the biggest feature of Springer Materials is the fact that all the information here is critically reviewed. The other fact is all the information, not all, a large amount of the information that we provide here is available granularly. So Springer Materials gives you the opportunity to click on the phase diagram and get the exact numerical coordinates. That's because we have all the raw data behind these graphs, and we offer it to the researchers in uh, a chance to explore this content at a very granular level. So you can click on the phase diagram and get all the information you want at a point level. Another example along the same vein would be when you're trying to find information for modeling and simulation. A very classic example is the separation of pyridine and methylpyridine in a waste stream. So this is a distillation example. And the reason why this particular example is very close to my heart is because I had done something very similar like this when I was doing my chemical engineering in India. And what you would need for the modeling of a system like this is the raw data. So Springer Materials does give you the option to download all this information as an Excel file. Like I mentioned, we do offer this the raw data download, so you can either get the complete plot, as you can see here, or download the raw data. So to summarize how this is useful to your researchers, firstly, this is a really large database. That really means all the information can be found on a single platform, and it's updated regularly. We issue updates every quarter to reflect progress in the field. The Landau-Bernstein database is very well regarded, and it's been around for a long time. But more importantly than that, that the critical review process means that the information that you find here is the most accepted by the relevant communities. It's a centralized search process. Currently, this search engine behind Springer Materials searches 7 databases, but we have really ambitious and progressive plans to add more. I can say that we are looking to add at least 3 databases in 2014 itself. And if you know how to use Google, you know how to use Springer Materials. We don't have much of a learning curve. It is very simple. And it is a completely browser-based platform that supports standard file types. We do support HTML, PDF, Excel, and RIS formats. So it's really easy to access information. It's very easy to search for information. And hopefully I was able to show you that the information itself is very relevant. So moving on to the next database is a database called Springer Protocols. Now, from a very long time, we've had scientists ask other scientists why a certain experiment was done, and if they say it was done a certain way, they're asked to reproduce it. So one of the really important things that have come across in the development of science and the development of research over the years is the reproducibility of experiments. And especially in the biomedical field and the biological field, it's very crucial that a certain experiment can be reproduced reliably. So that's what led to the development of standard methods for experiments. These experiments should follow these steps. They should have a clear motivation. They should give detailed information about the materials that are required, the equipment that are required, standardized instructions, sample statistics and graphical information, and a formal way of reporting this. These are in today's world in the biomedical field called protocols. Why would we use protocols? Researchers typically use protocols to solve biological problems, most importantly by being able to isolate variables. So if there is a standard way to conduct a certain experiment, and this is used reliably, this is used repeatably, it is reproducible, and is reliable, that really means it's possible to isolate a single variable like the temperature, like a certain volume, like a concentration, like a toxicity level, and tweak that one element and see how the biological system is affected by this. And researchers use these protocols and this method of isolating variables to study various things like treating diseases, developing drugs, monitoring biotechnology, etc. So protocols are quite useful in the biological field. And with this motivation, we have developed this product called Springer Protocols. Springer Protocols currently contains over 30,000 laboratory protocols in the biological, biomedical, and the life sciences field. It comes from the flagship series that's the Methods in Molecular Biology, along with a number of other resources, and it represents over 30 years of time-tested, reproducible, reliable, step-by-step procedures. And the simplest way to understand this would be a cooking recipe. It really does equate quite well to saying 2 parts water, 1 part flour, 1 part yeast, and in the end you get a great cake. So that would be a great analogy, and that's quite similar to the way Springer Protocols gives you information. However, in line with the other databases that Springer has, all this information is reviewed and is written by renowned experts. So where these protocols coming from, they are divided into a number of subject subject areas. On the left, you can see a bar graph that shows the various subjects that this database covers. The largest area, as you could imagine, is cell biology, followed by genetics. But we also have over 3,000 protocols on protein science. We have over 1,700 protocols on molecular medicine, cancer research, imaging and radiology, infectious diseases, etc. On the right, you can see a pie chart that gives you the various sources. The largest source, like I mentioned, is our flagship series, the Methods in Molecular Biology, but we also have a number of other sources that feed into Springer protocols, like the Methods in Molecular Medicine, Neuro Methods, Methods in Biotechnology, Methods in Pharmacology and Toxicology, and the Springer Protocols handbooks. So, where could you get this information? Springer Protocols is accessible via 2 platforms. You can access it via our platform, our main platform that you're all familiar with, Springer Link, and you can access Springer Protocols here along with all your other Springer holdings. But you can also access it on springerprotocols.com, which is a proprietary platform that gives you access to only Springer protocols. But this other platform gives you a number of advanced features like uploading your own protocols. It allows you to create saved searches. It allows you to personalize your search process. It allows you to create alerts and comment on the quality of research, on the quality of these protocols. So let's look at a very simple example again. Let's talk about, from a researcher's perspective, how would I use Springer protocols? So let's talk about Maize. Maize is a relatively well-known product. It is used quite frequently to be eaten directly. It's very healthy, it's very nutritious, and it tastes great. But just because it's so popular, we need to have crops of better quality and better quantity. Now, genetic engineering is one way to improve both the quality and the quantity of maize. And if you want to study how genetic engineering can be used to enhance this quality, Springer Protocols is one way to do this. So I can go to Springer Protocols and enter maize transformation in the query box. This is what Springer Protocols looks like. Again, like I mentioned, this can be accessed on 2 platforms on springerprotocols.com that you can see here. The same search can also be done on Springer Link. But for the sake of this presentation, I am choosing to just talk about Springer Protocols. So you can go to Springer Protocols and type in Maize transformation, and you can see a number of search results. And on the left, you can create filters, just like Springer Materials. Clicking on one of these documents would show you the summary page. This summary gives you an idea about what this document looks like. And the summary is available without having to actually open the protocols, so it helps you to quickly filter through the various protocols and determine the best protocols for your purpose. As I mentioned, A good protocol gives you detailed laboratory requirements and detailed chemical requirements, and Springer protocols does give you this information. As you can see on the left-hand side, the, the laboratory requirements are detailed all the way down to the type of beakers you need, the volume of the flasks, the concentration of the hydrochloric acid, etc. And on the right-hand side, you can see that there are various chemical requirements that are detailed in in great detail. So it gives you the type of solid media, it gives you the volumes, the molarity, etc. The methodology is also equally detailed. As you can see on the left-hand side, there are detailed instructions. Like I said, it is a recipe, so it does give you a chance to uh, follow this in a step-by-step method and uh, give you instructions of how to do this. But on the right-hand side, you can see it also contains additional notes, and these notes are more on the precautionary side. So it gives you an idea of what happens when these protocols have been run by these researchers in the real world and how to avoid the common pitfalls. There are experimental images that show you the various stages. In this example, you can see the corn and its various stages that have gone into the genetic transformation and the reforming of these corn seeds, and the inset gives you some of the laboratory level pictures for the same thing. So it gives you a variety of information, both at the laboratory level, which is actual practical hands-on experimental procedures, as well as the scientifically applicable graphs and images like the ones you see in the background. It also gives you related content like the references, but what's really useful is that you can also collect these protocols into a book. So Springer protocols, like Springer materials, originally started off as a book series, that's Methods in Molecular Biology, and it is possible to download all the protocols on a certain subject, in this case, transgenic maize. It's possible to download all of them as a single book. Now, I would like to caution you that Springer Protocols does not allow you to download all the protocols as a book. That can only be done on Springer Link. On Springer Protocols, you can download each individual protocol. So, to give you an idea of how is this useful for your researchers, firstly, 34,000 protocols is not a small number. It is a large number of protocols and the ability to find them all on a single platform really does help save time. All the content is really reviewed and comes from a really prestigious sources. That really means that the information that you find here, again, is quite relevant to your research, as well as can be relied upon to be of top quality. One of the defining differences of Springer protocols versus some of the other offerings that are out there is that we actually maintain the classic version of protocols. So normally when a newer version of a protocol is published, the older version is usually removed. And we feel that this is not the best idea, because very often there are laboratories that might not have the most advanced technologies, they might not have the most advanced equipment. So sometimes it does help to have older protocols that were written with older equipment in mind. So Springer Protocols does maintain both the sets of protocols. There are a number of collaborative features. Like I mentioned, it's possible to set up alerts for protocols. So if there's a new protocol that is published in your field, it's possible to be informed of this either through an RSS feed or a custom email solution. There are commenting features, so you can comment on the quality of certain protocols and your experiences with those protocols, and that helps other researchers. There is a possibility to upload your own protocols to um, help your fellow researchers, etc. And there is a fully optimized mobile website, because we believe that a recipe product like this makes sense that it's accessible at your workbench. So Springer Protocols has a great mobile platform that I encourage you to check out. You don't really need access to Springer Protocols to be able to play around with the mobile website. So I definitely recommend that you uh, go ahead and try to do so. Okay then. Uh, I hope you had a great chance to understand the value of Springer materials and Springer protocols. We will now move on to the next set of databases, and these are the ARIS BI databases. So this is a new venture of Springer that uh, hopefully we feel will be useful to the academic world. This is a set of 3 databases that are focused on on pharmaceuticals and pharmacological information more from a statistic and business perspective. And these databases are called R&D Insight that tracks the development of drugs from right from the workbench, so from the chemistry workbench all the way to the launch of the products into the market. This is um, the R&D Insight platform. The other database, the second database is called Clinical Trials Insight that tracks the clinical trials of these drugs when they are tested in the various phases, right from animal testing to human testing to regulation and compliance to actual release in the market. And it also does give you information about the literature and studies that have been performed as these trials are progressing. And the third database is a pharmacovigilance insight, and that is a database that gives you the summary of the various adverse drug reactions and the various product and marketing news that surround a certain drug after it is launched into the market. So you can easily visualize these 3 databases as being a set of the various steps for in the life cycle of a drug. The first one, R&D Insight, talks about the molecule, the state of a drug from the molecule to actually becoming a pill or a capsule. The Clinical Trials Insight talks about the testing of that capsule in the real world on selected uh, participants, so that's trials. And at the end, after it's released into the market, Pharmacovigilance Insight tracks these drugs as they are used in the real world. Now these, as you can imagine, this set of databases was classically relevant only to the corporate world, but we are in the process of evolving these databases because we really feel that there is a large amount of relevance to the academic world itself. And go a little more into detail, um, the R&D Insight is a set of drug profiles that is authored by ARIS, and it consolidates information from all around the world. The focus here, and the reason why I believe that it's highly relevant to the academic market, is that it gives you information at a very scientific level. It talks about the various phases of a certain molecule. It talks about its physical, chemical, medical, pharmacological, and toxicological properties. It talks about pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, its structures, and some clinical trials. It also does a very good job of relating the commercial names with the name of a molecule. Very often you hear names like Benadryl, ibuprofen, but this database does help you relate those commercial names with the actual molecule and its structures. It talks about the various development and the history of these molecules as they've gone over time, and this database is updated daily. Currently, it does contain about 28,000 drug profiles, and we add about 135 new drugs per month. The number of companies that are covered are about 4,700, and about 17,000 drug deals. The second database is the Clinical Trials Insight, and this database really talks about ongoing clinical trials and the studies that surround these. So it gives you information about the trial profiles, where they're being conducted, how they're being conducted, what are the demographics of the participants, what's the best evidence that has been offered, which phase of these trials these drugs are in, and it covers 32 therapeutic areas and over 400 indications. Again, this database is updated daily, and it currently contains trial profiles of 75,000 drugs and contains best evidence records of 156,000 trials. So this database is also, again, very vast, very comprehensive, and it can be granularly searched. Lastly, we have the pharmacovigilance insight that is basically a narrative summary of the adverse reactions that happen when a certain drug is in the market. So it does comply with the Council for International Organization of Medical Studies, and it also covers the periodic safety update reports. It is very relevant to researchers who are studying epidemiology and statistics of drug reactions, and it covers all the relevant Medline and M-based journals, which means it is tracking over 6,000 unique titles. Now, I didn't mention that this product is originally very, very strongly corporate, and as you can see, that's what you might be led to believe. But we are currently in the process of redesigning just the website to be relevant to the academic world. And there are some certain compelling evidences that we've seen in the past, and we've had a lot of demand from the academic world for this kind of information. So we really wanted to see why this information would be useful. The first kind of user who would find this information useful would be a early drug development researcher who is actually developing a drug. So if he is in the lab looking for a drug delivery system, or he's looking for the kinetics of a certain drug reaction, uh, before before it is published in the real world, this is the kind of resource he could use. It's also useful for a drug researcher when he is comparing the kind of information he has versus other drugs that are being developed by commercial entities. It's useful for him to evaluate his own research and to understand comparative information like new drug opportunities, negative results when a certain drug has succeeded, when a certain drug has failed, etc. It's also very useful to statisticians and epidemiologists because the fact that these three databases cover such a large set of information means that you can then perform a number of meta-analyses over these various clinical trial sets to study things like the demographics of the trial participants, the geographical implications of these trials, the various adverse reactions that have occurred, and also in the case of pharmacovigilance, the kind of reactions that have occurred after drugs released into the market. So it's definitely very, very useful to statisticians and epidemiologists. And lastly, I personally do believe that the ADAS-BI databases are quite relevant to grant writing, because if a researcher is developing a certain drug, there has been a large number of documented cases where corporate entities and pharmaceutical industries would be interested in funding the research of these professors and academic researchers, and these kind of databases would be a great resource for these researchers, for these professors, to look at which companies are interested in investing in certain drugs, and then approach these pharmaceutical companies. I would say it is also really relevant to the researchers if they are studying a certain drug, if they're able to see the clinical trials and which drugs have failed in the market, and that helps them orient their research in a certain direction. And that's again a great case for grant writing if they have a certain molecule that is succeeding where other drugs have failed at the clinical trial stage. The ADAS-BI databases and their clinical trials insight would help these grant writers write relevant proposals to the right industries. Okay, so hopefully this is a product that should come out in 2014 itself, and if you have any questions, I would definitely recommend you to reach out to me or to anyone at Springer, your representatives, and we can definitely provide you with more information. Moving on to the last database that I would like to talk about today, this is a database called ZBMath. And ZBMath is a short for Zentralblatt Math, which is currently the world's most comprehensive abstracting service for the pure and applied mathematics. It does cover mathematical papers all the way from 1868 to the present, and it contains over 3 million entries from over 3,000 journals, 1,100 serials, and over 170,000 books. And we do include over 120,000 new mathematical abstracts every year. This database also does cover reviews that again are written by experts, and each of these 3 million entries is tagged with a mathematical subject classification, which really means because it has this rich metadata, searching for information becomes really easy. It also does contain over 1.6 million links to the original electronic versions, and very often it contains links to open access content. So it, through the use of the eLib and EduML, it's possible to go to the original content directly and read the article. So to give you a really quick overview of what this platform might look like, if you go to www.zbmath.org, it gives you a search field like this, and you can search either by the author or the document or journal. And in this example, I'm looking for the words, the monodromy conjecture, written by the author Lisa Van Proyen, and only published within the year 2010. So this is a very specific example, and that's the kind of information that mathematicians tend to like. They want to be able to search for a single document. Like I mentioned earlier, that is a indication of a good database if you're able to isolate a single paper like this. And you can do this kind of filtering using ZBMath. You can also just say I'm looking for monodromy conjecture and not do this detailed a search, and you will get quite similar results. Looking at the kind of abstract that you would see here, this is the abstract that is supplied by ZBMath. And what's really useful to note here is that ZBMath is currently one of the very, very few databases out there that correctly renders MathML. Now, MathML is a new standard that is developed by the mathematical consortia around the world to accurately render mathematical formulae online. As you can imagine, HTML and JavaScript never do a good job of showing you a mathematical equation correctly, but ZBMath is one of the few resources that does implement MathML, and this is going to be the new future standard, and I'm happy to say that we are quite at the forefront of displaying information like this. What's also really useful to see on a product like ZBMath is the ability to search in the other direction. So very often you are interested in searching for an abstract of an article published in a certain area, and as I showed you earlier, it's possible to search that way by just typing in the name of the paper and optionally adding in the name of the author and getting a list of all the papers in that subject area. But what if you want to track a certain author? Because in my personal opinion, an author who publishes in a certain field is classically going to publish in the same field. So what if you need to track a certain author who's very prolific or very well renowned in a certain field, or find the kind of people that he's associating with or publishing along with? So ZBMath does give you that opportunity to create an author profile. So in this case, I'm looking at all the papers that were ever published by Mark Yor. As you can see, he is definitely very, very well known. He has published over 460 pieces of information that include 53 books. So ZBMath does give you an opportunity to track all the papers, all the books that he has ever published, and also find all the authors that he is publishing with. You can also track the various journals he's published in and the various subjects that he's publishing in. This becomes very useful for two sets of people. Firstly, if I'm a relatively young researcher and I need to find all the papers on a certain subject area, using the author profiles makes it very easy to determine who do I track and where do I find papers easily. Additionally, we have found, and this is actually testimonials from a number of libraries, that being able to access author profiles like this is very useful to decision makers at various departments, because it allows you to see the publishing history of a certain professor. So especially in cases of determining tenure and in determining assistantships and hiring decisions, we've realized that author profiles has proved pretty invaluable. It's also possible to study the profile of a journal. Again, I would expect this to be very relevant to libraries in their acquisitions activities. So in this example, we are looking at the Journal of Fluid Mechanics. And as you know, this is a very popular journal. And it's possible to use ZBMath to study the various, uh, not only the various types of articles that have been published in this particular journal, but to look at the publishing history within this journal. You can also see that in this example, there are over 13,000 articles that have been published within the Journal of Fluid Mechanics. It's been around since, I guess, the 1950s, and it is growing at a very steady pace. So this journal is very healthy, and since it has so many publications, obviously it has great value, it has great quality, and great readership. So I personally believe that the journal profile section of ZBMath is very relevant to the acquisitions activities for libraries. So to really summarize the various databases that we have within Springer, we call it our happy family. The first database is Springer Materials, and it is a database that gives you the physical and chemical properties of materials. We have endeavored as far as possible to give you information that is very granular. It's very searchable because all this information is tagged with the name of a material and the name of a property. It is possible to say I'm looking for the vapor pressure of methanol, I'm looking for the tensile strength of stainless steel, I'm looking for the boiling point of water, if that's what you want, and zero into exactly that information. The other big facet of Springer Materials is that all this information has been critically reviewed by the method I showed you. That really means that all the information you find on Springer Materials is very granular, it is very searchable, and very reliable. The second database is called Springer Protocols. This database is basically a step-by-step recipe for the performance of various experiments in biotechnology, biomedicine, pharmacology, and the life sciences. And we offer it on two platforms, on Springer Link, where it's possible to download the entire book on a certain subject if that's what you want. We also offer it on springerprotocols.com that has a number of collaborative features where you can comment on the quality of a certain protocol, you can create alerts, you can upload your own protocol, and we also have a great mobile website. The third set of the next database is ZBMath, which is essentially an abstracting service for mathematical papers only. So this is a great resource not only for the researchers who are looking for these abstracts, but also for departments and librarians, and hopefully I was able to show you that. And our last set of databases is the ADIS suite, which is a collection of databases that come originally from the corporate world but focus on pharmaceutical research and drugs and clinical trials and adverse reactions, and hopefully is very relevant to the academic world itself. And with that, I would like to say thank you for your attention. Thank you to Choice and ACRL for putting together this webinar and give an opportunity for me to kind of go back to my days of being a researcher and look at these databases both as a product manager and a researcher. So thank you, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Thanks, Mikail, for that great overview. We have just a few minutes left now for questions, so let's get started with that. Feel free to submit your questions. The first one we have here is, do you have any databases for geosciences or the geoscientists?
We do not have a unique database for geosciences or geographic information. However, Springer Materials does contain a small set of geographical data. Springer as a company also does publish a large amount of raw data on the geosciences, and those are hosted on Springer's internal repository, and access to these data sets usually accompanies the access to any of the geosciences books. So if you have access to these books through your library, or if you purchase these books through our web shop, you get a URL that will direct you to these data sets. So yes, we do have large data sets that are associated with the geosciences.
Okay, great. Uh, and what are the rights uses of these databases, DRM, et cetera, specifically for Springer protocols and materials?
That's a great question. Springer actually has a no DRM policy that really means as long as you comply with the basic fair use and the basic ethical use of the information, you're free to download this, you're free to share this with your colleagues, both within and in other organizations. You're free to address these and reference this in your own research, and Springer makes it, rather attempts to make it as easy and as painless to use our information as possible.
Great. And how is Springer protocols related to Springer Link?
Springer protocols, as I mentioned, is contained within Springer Link in terms of the fact that the content within the methods of molecular biology, for example, are accessible from both platforms. However, they are unique products, so even if you do have access to Springer protocols, you can access this content on Springer Link. But on Springer Link, it does function as a separate product, so it needs a separate subscription. So in essence, they are different platforms, but they're just accessible from both locations.
Okay, great. Well, it looks like that is all the questions we have submitted. Um, if we have no more questions, I want to thank everyone, and it does look like we're about ready to wrap up then our time together today. So I'm going to turn things back over to Laura.
Great. Thanks, Christy, and thanks to Mikail. I would like to give you both a virtual round of applause for spending time with us today and sharing some great information. Just as a reminder, we have recorded today's program, so be on the lookout for a follow-up email from Choice, a CRL that will include instructions on accessing the archived version. Thanks again.